Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment. Thank you so much for tuning in to us. We really appreciate all of the audience that listen to us. We have a wonderful young person today, Angela. She's going to come and introduce herself to us. She's going to tell us all the things that she has created at this point. And then, as we do at Threads of Enlightenment, is go back and start the journey and backtrack to where she is today. I want to thank you so much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I am so honored and I'm so excited. I don't know if it's obvious. I really am excited. I was just like, normally by now it's like 10:42 p.m. in the Philippines. I literally sleep like a grandma. I live like a grandma. Like I try to be as healthy as possible, and like it's actually way past my bedtime. I know I'm like I told you I'm like a grandma, but like I'm just so excited. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so excited to share where I've been through with people. I've definitely not lived the conventional Asian path at all. I was so excited to share that.
Oh, that's awesome. I know that you have some of your service. Tell them about some of the things that you have currently that they can utilize for their benefit to help them to become better human spirits.
So right now I have a podcast that I'm starting and going to be committing to starting next year. I actually have two
Nice.
episodes out.
Congrats.
I'm going to be adding one every single week, so that's a commitment. It's called Pussy Power. I know it's a little bit controversial, the name, but it's there's actually a story behind that. I really do want to advocate women empowerment and kind of just like liberating women from the shackles of
Hmm.
having to fit into a certain mold just because it's what their religion or their parents or society expects of them. So
That's
yeah,
awesome.
a little bit of a funny name.
No, I kind of like the name because I know one particular war, pretty famous war that was started because of that. I guess you could say um, the Trojan War was started because of a woman. So
Hmm.
we know that there are other wars and things that fell. Empire, that was actually an empire, fell because of a woman. So there is much power in what you're saying. So talk to us then how you grew up, what your family life was about, because that's the place where we began our uh, people began to program us. So, how was your family? How many siblings? That type of stuff.
So I was 4 years old when I witnessed my mom pointing a knife at my dad, and
Hmm.
my dad stabbing my mom's lower lip with a knife. Not a knife, a fork.
Wow.
It was super painful as a kid because like my dad was my best friend, and
Hmm.
seeing my mom just cry like that with her kind of like holding me to her chest and seeing tears fall down her face really just like made me feel like I was betrayed by my own best friend.
Wow.
And I pretty much grew up in a complete family until I was 4, until I saw that. And my mom kind of like ran away. She obviously she was physically, physically hurt.
Hmm.
And from that point on, my mom became a single mother. So
Hmm.
she separated from my dad, kind of like hid us. And it's funny because I feel like this is one of my superpowers, really. It's that I don't think I've been super programmed by both my parents, mainly because
Hmm.
I grew up without them. When my dad did what he did, we got estranged from him, my siblings and I. And my mom had to take on a really big role. She wanted to make sure that we still lived a good life and we didn't feel like there was someone missing from our lives. So she took on both the roles of mom and dad. She had to become an overseas worker. And because of that, I feel like obviously I still got some conditioning, some programming, but not so much as to where that kind of programming is like something that binds me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah. That ties you up in knots, as I say. We become programmed in thoughts as a result of what people say to us, call us names or whatever, tell us you can't do this, you know, you're no good, all those type programming that we have to eventually face as we get older, because we kind of play those things into loops, going back and forth, those words that become monsters in our life that later on we have to face to gain our freedom
Yeah.
from those thoughts. So it's good to hear that you weren't that program, as you said,
Oh, I
that
wasn't that
you.
programmed, but if there was one thing I did have, it was daddy issues. That's for sure.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's a part of the journey that we're going to talk about, because you can't have an incident like that and not be traumatized to some degree, whereby you are now, once you're traumatized, we have a perceived idea about certain things, which causes us to approach people a certain way from that incident. So, talk to us about that incident, because that is a traumatic incident for a young girl to see such violence between parents. You know, to the point where it's stabbing and knives and all those things are involved. Talk to us about some of those quote unquote daddy issues that arise from there, or with dealing with men in any way, shape, or form.
I love that you talk about this. So, the issues that have developed from that incident have been twofold. The first one has to do with my relationships and my relationship with men. The second one has to do with my relationship with conflict. So, I'm going to be touching on both of those. The first
Hmm.
one is actually crazy. It's
Hmm.
just like, oh my God. I have literally like a tendency for guys that are like at least 15 years older. I just like them. They're just like so much smarter, so much more experienced. And I've kind of like had in my previous attempts at relationships, I've
Hmm.
had this tendency to kind of like chase after a guy.
Hmm.
And as a feminine, as you know, as someone in a feminine body, that almost always doesn't really work out, because when you're chasing, obviously the person or the object you're chasing, you know that their tendency is to run away.
Hmm.
And mm, my experience was when, because I had this relationship with my dad where he was, you know, he was a businessman, he was a self-made man, and I'm actually proud of the person that he has become,
Hmm.
despite, you know, his lack of resources, his lack of good parenting as well. I'm proud of who he is. It's just that back then when I was a teenager, you know, when I didn't experience having a solid father figure in my life, it translated because our dynamic was I would only see him, because he's a very
Hmm.
busy businessman. I would only see him when I got awards in school,
Hmm.
when there was something to be proud of.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, I guess my subconscious translated that into you have to be the best. You have to stand out. You have to prove yourself so that you can be worthy of someone's love. And
Hmm.
the very first time I experienced that, I was 17 and I got into a pseudo relationship with a 35-year-old. There wasn't
Hmm.
any label and it drove me crazy.
Hmm.
So I just
Hmm.
wanted that label of a girlfriend and he just wouldn't give it to me. Obviously, because he was also a businessman, and you know, being in a relationship with a 17-year-old will definitely raise eyebrows.
Yeah.
So um that's been kind of like the daddy issues that I've experienced. It's like I had to chase, I had to constantly prove myself, prove that I'm
Hmm.
better than, you know, most girls out there, that I'm better than who I was yesterday. And it just kind of like created this loop of like, am I worthy, am I good enough, is it like, is what I'm doing enough to have this person's love? That was what developed out of that like dynamic that I had with my dad.
Wow, that's profound stuff. That's heavy stuff, actually. And
Let's just laugh
how
about it here.
how did you manage that? Because for someone to recognize that you have, looking back, I'm sure that these were some of the issues that you adapted as a result of the incident. How did you manage your life in the sense of you mentioned this first gentleman that you got involved in? How did life proceed after that, and how did you and when did you become aware of your behavior and your patterns?
Hmm. The second guy that I liked, he's not 18 years older than me. He's actually 31 years older than me. So I was like, wait. There's a pattern here. And it was like the same dynamic where I had to like, I felt like
Uh-huh.
I had to always praise him, or I had to always like appeal to his ego so that he would pay
Hmm.
attention to me, or like something like that. What really truly made me aware was that for some reason, I like, obviously it happened a second time, and I also had dalliances with guys who were chasing me, and it just didn't
Hmm.
feel right for me. Like, it just felt like there's no attraction here, there's no magic here. And like,
Wow.
when I was chasing, I was like, oh my god, this is so exciting, this is so awesome, not
Hmm.
knowing that I was actually responding to, a trauma response.
Yeah.
I was experiencing the dynamic that I had with my dad. And it's so
Yes.
funny because it's, oh my God, this is really, really, really weird. But when I was
Mhm.
17 and I had nothing going for me, there was this one psychic like professor at my university. I was in
Mhm.
high school, literally like no direction whatsoever. And he was, um, talking to me and my best friend. He was telling us how um, my sex life would be awesome because I'm so freaking crazy and I'm so weird. And he was just like jamming with us until he told me that I would be so successful, but I would go home to an empty house.
Wow.
And that just scared me. Like, I was like,
Mhm.
I really did not want that to happen.
Mhm.
So I kind of took things into my own hands, and I decided to go to therapy. I decided to work through my relationship with my dad.
Mhm.
And believe it or not, it actually paid off.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm in a really healthy relationship right now, like the healthiest relationship. I didn't even know like I could be in such a healthy relationship. But I guess having worked through those issues made me realize that yes, I could still achieve the things that I've achieved, but I don't have to come from a place of questioning if I'm
Mhm.
good enough.
Yeah, that's a great lesson to learn um, early in life, that there is value in yourself, and I think that's one of the most lessons that any individual can learn and should learn, should endeavor everything within themselves to learn the value of who you are, because at the end of that, or the beginning of that, I think is when we start our journey of self love, number one, but also this journey of enlightenment that I mentioned earlier. So here you've just now went into therapy. It's a great place to start because someone else can look into your situation and give you some insights. So you're here and you are now starting your journey of enlightenment. You mentioned that you had to face your dad and create a new pattern of thinking. And as you go from one pattern of thinking, I always say that that's the key in this whole thing, is that we're breaking patterns of thought life, because the thought is what governs our lives. So here you are, you started moving forward, dealing with your dad. Did you had any how did you frame your relationship with your mother?
Whew, my my relationship with my mom had everything to do with my relationship with control. because my mom
Mhm.
is amazing. Even though she was an overseas worker, I never really felt like she was away. She still felt like she was there, the doting mother, always supporting me, always cheering me on, always being the number one fan, the number one person who believed in me, before
Mhm.
anyone else did. And I love her, but also at the same time, it's like we had this like love hate relationship. Why was that? Well, for one very simple thing, she wanted obedience, and the way
Mhm.
she felt respected was when she was obeyed. Now,
Mm.
being, the eldest daughter of like two two parents who got separated, it was pretty much my way or the highway.
Mhm.
And you just had like two alpha women just like butting heads. I remember
Mhm.
literally like she would only be with us for like every once a month every year, or like 2 months out of the year. And
Mhm.
I literally, there would not be a week that we didn't have a major fight.
Hmm.
So it's that asserting my independence and her need for
Mhm.
control. This is why I think it also affected me in a way where it's like I have a really weird relationship with authority where I just like despise it. I try to rebel as much as I can, and now I have the awareness that I'm not actually against that person in the uniform. It's just the dynamic of my relationship with my mom and the issues that I had with her.
Hmm. And how did you change your mindset from with your relationship with her, and how did that go?
I think, if I'm being honest, it's the daddy issues part that I've dealt with. I'm yet to really um, do the same for my mom right now. Literally, like on if honestly, if I see someone in their uniform like staring at me, I would still have jitters. I would still
Mhm.
I would still be very nervous, and I would just assume the worst of them, and then they
Mhm.
turn out to be really nice. But right now, how I kind of like deal with it is actually my mom and I kind of just had a falling out. Now that it's Christmas, we kind of like rekindled our relationship. But
Mhm.
how I'm dealing with it is practicing the understanding of her perspective,
Mhm.
and knowing that she's coming from a good place. She has the best intentions for me, even though she might not always express them in
Mhm.
a way that I respond to in the best way. So that's still pretty much a struggle, because she loves to feel needed, but
Mhm.
I love asserting my independence.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like when she feels like I'm being too independent, she doesn't feel like I need her. She feels like I'm not, giving her time, not giving her the attention. Like
Mhm.
my mom and I are best friends,
Yeah.
but she is definitely very sensitive. And to really answer your question, I still don't know. I still don't know how to do it.
It sounds
That's
like
still a
you're
struggle.
working it out.
Yeah, yeah,
So.
yeah, totally. Like she I notice that when I'm in a place in my life where I need help, like
Mhm.
it's actually funny. I'm here in her place right now because our place in Cebu literally got wrecked. Not wrecked. Our place, we got lucky, but like Cebu right now is not work conducive. Literally, like you
Mhm.
would see trees falling over in the news. I'm in her place right now because I asked her for help, and
Mhm.
we haven't talked to each other for like the past 4 months because I said something that offended her. And now that I'm coming
Mm.
to her, she feels needed. She feels like, oh,
Yeah.
my daughter is my daughter again. We
Mhm.
we're in a much better place now. Although of course there are still issues that need to be resolved.
Well, I'm sure you guys will find a way. It's amazing how life has a way of orchestrating situations to cause us to face some of those incidents and those loops that we form in our mind. I love the fact that you had mentioned how you respond to someone in uniform. And we call it conditioned response. And I usually give an example of when people see a police car behind them when they're driving, even though they're obedient to the law, following everything, they will hit that, press their brakes because they have been conditioned. And so you mentioned you're conditioned in the sense that you see that authoritative figure and all of your radars just go bonkers, which is kind of
Yeah.
cool. And it's just, it's just life. We have to learn how to rewire all of our things because, as you mentioned, the expectation is usually what is formed from there. And if we are not careful, we can miss our blessing or day of visitation because we've already made a judgment about someone standing in front of us, even in a uniform, not knowing that that person was sent to you and I, that has the answer to free us for the next 20 years of our life. So we always have to be aware and to respond when those things come. So that's the beautiful space that you're in with your mom, because I'm sure life will cause situations to happen where you guys are going to have a conversation and talk a little more as to how you can move from where you're at. So you got a lot going on. You're here, and you mentioned that your base, your place of security, home has been damaged.
Hmm.
How does that make you feel inside? How does it make you feel?
Our place, I actually lived in a condo in Cebu. It's perfectly fine the way it is. But outside, like,
Hmm.
literally, I've experienced what it's like to run out of food and water. Like, the shortage,
Hmm.
like, I was just shocked that it didn't matter anymore how much money you had. People went
Hmm.
back to the basics. So I guess
Yeah.
for me, oh my God, going through it was the worst, you know?
Hmm.
I would literally I would literally be on the bed just like sweating bullets because there's no power at 3 a.m. in the morning. And
Wow.
going through it, it felt horrible. It felt like, is this how I'm gonna spend my Christmas? Like what? Crazy. But I think having gone through that, it's my first time experiencing a real legit typhoon that was like a super typhoon, you know?
Hmm.
And going through that just gave me perspective of how much I actually had and
Yeah.
how good I had it because I
Hmm.
never had to experience like shortage of food and water and fuel.
Hmm.
And I definitely have more of an appreciation for helpers around the house now because we
Yeah.
literally had to do everything by ourselves and it's just
Yeah.
a mess. But inside going through it, I think I just really have this sense, this knowing that I'm being led somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a reason why I'm here. There's a reason why I went through that. It's freaking inconvenient having
Hmm.
to go through those things. But I think, I'm a college dropout. And before
Hmm.
I even stepped foot inside my first college class, I knew I would be a dropout. I knew I wasn't meant to be there. And I guess after having the proof, and even before having the proof, I just always have the sense of knowing that I'm being guided. And so, even though
Yeah.
it looks awful on the outside, even though it doesn't make sense to other people, I
Hmm.
trust that knowing because I know it's going to lead me where I need to be. And it's led me
Yeah.
here.
Awesome. I'm so glad that you're listening to that inner voice for guidance, because that is gives us the assuredness in how we approach a situation where we are not governed by what's happening around us, but we are governed by that assuredness that is within us, so that we are able to handle all of the things that, as you said, a typhoon swirling all around. but the inner individual, the inner spirit of that individual is guided, and the calm is there, as it stated, calm within the storm.
Yeah. Of course, there's still, the freak out moments like, oh my God, you
Oh
don't
yeah.
have water. But yeah, there's
Yeah,
that
yeah,
feeling of
yeah.
safety and certainty.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say to people, I remember I was in ashram, and this guru said something one day while we were sitting down, and she was teaching. She said, "Let life disturb your comfort." I'll never forget that thing because it leapt straight into my being, and it has guided me in my life when situations, uncomfortable situations happen. That thought will come in, and help me to navigate through the mess, as they say. So here you are. You are going through all this. You're with mom now, still navigating through that relationships. You've dealt with your the daddy issues, as they say. You are now in a wonderful relationship. You have a podcast starting. I love the title, by the way, because I think women rule the world, but that's just another conversation. And I got that from actually hanging out with my granddaughter. One day I'm shopping with her, and I had her in her cart. She's of about 4 years old, 4 or 5 years old. And I'm picking clothes for her and just dropping it in the cart. And she looks at me, she says, "Papa, can you get me out of the cart?" And I said, "Sure." So I took her out, and she bent over, Angela, and took every single thing out and tossed it back and says, "I don't want any of that. I know exactly what I wanted." And I realized no guy at 4 years old know exactly what he wanted. And so I got that epiphany then that women rule the world right there in I think you're in Target or somewhere. So that's where my epiphany happened, that you guys rule the world. So I love your title. It is an excellent title. So how did you, from the daddy issues and all of the other things, how in the world, Angela, did you come from that to think, let me start a podcast?
Very good question. How did the podcast happen? I think it really just started when backstory, when I dropped out of college.
Mm,
There was another violent thing that happened there, firsthand experience of
mm,
my dad hitting me.
mhm,
And I traveled to Saudi Arabia to do some soul searching. And I was just with my mom at that point. I was trying to build myself, and I built $150,000 business
mhm,
while I was there. And at one point, I just always wanted to be independent. I just always wanted to make money so that I make my own rules, because
mhm,
independence is a really big thing for me. And
mm,
I just didn't like following anybody else's rules anymore. So having gone through that, having gone through the soul searching and whatnot, yes, I had like an amazing lifestyle. Like, people who were my age were looking up to me, asking me how I did it, and they just really thought that I had my shit together.
mhm,
And then, like, one day, there, oh my God, even before that, I just had like the nudges somewhere in the pit of my stomach, where I would wake up in the morning and I would just dread what I did. Like,
wow.
I would just not be excited to work. I would just, like, I knew there was money coming in. I knew
Mhm,
that, I had it so good that, after dropping out of college, not everybody like gets to have some mini version of success in a short amount of time, and especially in the middle of a pandemic. But I don't know what it was, but there was something that was kind of like, there was kind of like a weight that made me feel like I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing.
mm,
And it's kind of like, it felt like I climbed a mountain, and I felt like I won, and I just like
mhm,
planted my flag like on the top, on the summit of that mountain, and I wasn't fulfilled.
mm,
I wasn't truly, truly, truly excited. I wasn't
mhm.
lit up by what I was doing. Like, I'm not like this. When I would wake up in the morning, I'd be like, just dreading it. And I guess the podcast, kind of like the podcast idea, became like a side project that excited me. It
Hmm.
started when I saw that like there is this podcaster named Alex Cooper.
Hmm.
She had a $60 million deal with Spotify for her podcast, and she owns 100% of the intellectual property. And
Wow.
I guess I've always wanted to just talk to people and
Hmm.
really know what their experiences are. Like I've always wanted to talk to prostitutes and try to understand and try to like see where they're coming from, or whether it's like someone who's made it and lost it all. I just really want to be able to get down and dirty with someone and know their story and know who they really are.
There's some power in that stuff. I love this. That's what we do here at Threads. I love to have that conversation to see. That's why I always have you start with what you have created, and then once we paint that canvas, that picture, then we go back and see how you put each color in, and those colors are put in by the decisions that you had, the awakening that you had, the overcoming issues that you had. And as you begin to paint that tapestry, that canvas with those type pictures, it becomes this beautiful thing that you talked about in the beginning of the podcast. And so that's what I love about mine, is that I am able to have that conversation, like you said, where you're going down to the people and seeing how powerful um, you mentioned your podcast name, Pussy Power. I get to see how powerful the human spirit is with mine, and you will get to see the same with that podcast, that type. You'll see how this fortress, this once we have decided, there's nothing, Angela, that can stop that human being once they have decided. You made a decision. You said, "I need help," and you went and you got your help. There was nothing to stop you, and so the power of the human spirit fascinates me. So I love that you are on that journey, and I personally want to thank you for coming, because I love your spirit. I love the fact, um, you know, and it's funny. You're right. When people are in that position where they're dreading to get up to go to work, that's when you know you need a change. They'll
Yeah,
die.
I'm just really fortunate that I listened to it. And
Hmm.
I guess like one of the biggest things is that most people, I think, they're scared to lose certainty. They're
Yes.
scared to
Yeah.
lose. What if I don't like what if I don't get to feed myself thrice a day? What if I lose
Yeah.
the money for my rent? And
Yes.
I've had those fears. I've had those fears where I'm like, what if I don't look successful anymore? What if I become a nobody again and I have to start over and I have to beg my parents to kind of like help me out because I'm starting over because I don't love what I'm doing anymore. And I
Hmm.
know that I did it for the money, and now that the money's there, it just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel meaningful, and it just felt like it was sucking my soul out of my being. And I think, like, just from my own experience, if there's anyone who's listening right now and still needs to hear it, I don't know what happened there, but yes, I was scared. I had all these thoughts of like what ifs in my head. But for
Hmm.
some reason, the universe, God, whatever name you have for that higher source, it came, or she came through for me, and it just all worked out, and I'm really
Yeah.
amazed. I'm amazed. I love what you do here in Threads of
Oh, thank
Enlightenment.
you.
I definitely would love to experience what you just said, see the human spirit, see people's souls for who they are,
Yeah.
and have that like catharsis, the ones that you have. And I admire you, Ken, for
Oh, thank you.
following that voice inside you, that desire to have this.
Oh, thank you so much. I love this thing, um, because for me, I got a chance to see and investigate the human spirit, the human power that is inert within all of us. It's dormant, and usually As I mentioned on the onset, life is trying to wake us up to who we are, and will tap us on our shoulders with incidents and situations that arise. Yours came from out of the incident that you saw your parents there, you witnessed that, and from that, give birth to this woman and where she is today. And so these things in life give birth to us, but once we are birthed, we tap into that power that resides within us, and it's something inside. If money was the answer, you would not have rich people committing suicide. If wealth on the outside was the answer, you would not get it. All of these things is not the answer. It's what's inside of the individual. That force, when that language and that begins to speak to your spirit and say to you, I want more out of you because I have brought you here for more. And I believe, Angela, that we go through our situations in life so that when we come out of it, we are able and wise enough to now begin to teach people how to come out of theirs, because there's a lot of hurting people. And I am so proud of you of what you're doing. It's a beautiful concept. I love it. I will support it in every way. I want to thank you so much, Angela, for presenting yourself to us here at Threads of Enlightenment. And if you need anything from us, please ask. And I truly enjoyed this conversation, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ken. I'm so honored and grateful that I got to share my story. And honestly, this whole time, I just felt so lit up in a way that I haven't been in a long time. So honestly, it's more of a thank you from me.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you. Everyone who's listening to this podcast, we hope to continually help you to learn how to embrace moments of darkness, because it is in the darkness that we learn how to develop and use our abilities to truly see those parts of ourselves, often invisible to us, in the light. It becomes your responsibility to navigate through all of your trials, to find out who you truly are, and begin your journey to loving yourself, which is possibly one of the most difficult things you will ever do in your life. To love yourself and to find the real you. But always remember to enjoy the journey. Thank you for coming by. Please subscribe. And if you can support us financially, we deeply appreciate it.